It all started when the power went out late one night, leaving me alone with Dr. Carter in the dimly lit break room. The hospital generator kicked in almost immediately, but for those few seconds of darkness, I felt his presence beside me, closer than ever before. My heart raced, and I could swear I heard his breath catch too. I'm Emily, a nurse on the night shift at St. Mary's Hospital. I've been here for about a year now, and I've always prided myself on being professional, dedicated to my patients, focused on my work. I'm not the type to let distractions creep in, but lately, I've been losing that battle, and it's all because of Dr. James Carter. Dr. Carter, isn't just any surgeon. He's the kind of man who walks into a room and makes the air shift. Tall, with piercing blue eyes and a smile that could unravel anyone, he's brilliant too. A top surgeon who thrives under pressure. But there's something else about him. Something the whispers in the halls hint at. Late-night flings. A trail of broken hearts. I've heard it all, and I've tried to tune it out. He's my superior, after all. The hospital's no fraternization. Policy isn't just a suggestion. It's a line I've never dreamed of crossing. Until that night. We'd had a brutal shift. A multi-car accident had flooded the ER with patients, and by midnight, exhaustion hung heavy over everyone. I'd slipped into the break room for a coffee, the hum of the vending machine the only sound in the silence. Then the lights flickered and died. I froze, cup in hand, as the darkness swallowed the room. That's when I realized I wasn't alone. James was there, leaning against the counter, close enough that I could smell the faint cedar of his cologne. When the generator buzzed to life, dim emergency lights casting shadows across his face, our eyes locked. There was something in his gaze, something unguarded, almost like a question. My pulse hammered in my throat. Neither of us moved, the air thick with words we couldn't say. "Emily," he said finally, his voice low, rough around the edges. "Are you okay?" I nodded, clutching my coffee like a lifeline. "Yeah, Dr. Carter, just startled." He stepped closer, that smile of his flickering. "You can call me James when we're not on duty." Heat crept up my neck. "Okay, James." The word felt forbidden, like I'd already crossed some invisible boundary. Footsteps broke the moment, sharp, hurried. Sarah, my best friend and fellow nurse, burst in, her face flushed. "Emily, you all right? That outage freaked me out." "I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile. Her eyes darted between James and me, narrowing slightly. Sarah's always been the cautious one, the voice of reason when I need it most. I could tell she sensed something, but she didn't push. The rest of the shift was a blur, but I couldn't shake him. James. Every time we passed in the hall, his glance lingered a beat too long. Once, handing me a chart, his fingers brushed mine, and the jolt was electric. I told myself it was nothing, just exhaustion playing tricks. But deep down, I knew better. Then, as I was updating charts near the nurse's station, I caught a snippet of conversation that stopped me cold. Nurse Rachel, sharp-tongued and perpetually sour, was muttering to another nurse, her voice low but venomous. I saw them in the break room during the outage, looked awfully cozy. My stomach dropped. Rachel's never liked me. She's made that clear since day one, always ready with a jab or a glare. If she suspected something, even if it was just a hunch, she'd twist it into a weapon. Gossip spreads like wildfire here, and with the hospital's rules, I couldn't let that happen. By the time my shift ended, I was a mess of nerves. I grabbed my bag, ready to escape, when I opened my locker and found a folded note tucked inside. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. Scrawled in neat, slanted handwriting. "Meet me in the parking lot after your shift. We need to talk. James." I stared at it, my mind spinning. Talk about what? Was he going to warn me about Rachel? Or was this something else? Something riskier? I should have tossed it, walked away. But instead I shoved it into my pocket, my heart thudding with a mix of dread and anticipation. As I headed to the parking lot, the night air cool against my skin, I didn't notice the figure watching me from the shadows. Not yet. You won't believe what happened next. Subscribe for more workplace secrets. The next few days were a whirlwind of stolen glances and unspoken words. Every time James passed me in the hospital corridors, his eyes lingered just a moment too long, igniting a spark I couldn't ignore. My heart raced whenever he was near, and though I knew I was treading dangerous ground, the thrill of it pulled me in deeper. It was a quiet Thursday night, a rare lull in the usual chaos of the hospital. I'd just finished my rounds and was heading to the basement for supplies, when I heard footsteps behind me. Turning, I saw James, his white coat unbuttoned, his demeanor more relaxed than I'd ever seen. "Emily," he said, his voice soft and warm. "Need a hand?" I forced a smile, keeping my tone playful. "Sure, if you're not too busy saving." "Lives." He chuckled, falling into step beside me as we descended the stairs. The basement was dimly lit, the flickering fluorescent lights casting eerie shadows on the concrete walls. Down here, it felt like we'd stepped into another world, far from the watchful eyes of the wards above. We reached the supply room, and James leaned casually against the doorframe, his gaze fixed on me. "You've been avoiding me," he teased, though there was a hint of something deeper in his tone. I paused, my hand resting on a box of gloves. "Avoiding you? No, I've just been busy." He stepped closer, the space between us shrinking. Busy, or maybe scared? My breath hitched. Scared of what? Of this. His fingers brushed a strand of hair from my face, the touch so gentle it sent shivers racing down my spine. Of what's happening between us. I swallowed hard, my pulse hammering. "James, we can't." "Why not?" His voice dropped to a whisper, his eyes searching mine. "No one has to know." The reasons screamed in my head. The hospital's strict no fraternization policy, the risk to my career, the rumors that could ruin us both. But my lips stayed silent. Instead, I leaned into his touch, my defenses crumbling like sand. A sudden voice cut through the tension. "Emily, you down here?" It was Sarah, my best friend and fellow nurse. I jolted back, my heart leaping into my throat as if we'd been caught red-handed. James straightened, his expression cool and composed. "Yeah, I'm here," I called, forcing my voice to steady. "Just grabbing some supplies." Sarah appeared, in the doorway, her eyes narrowing as she took in the scene. "Dr. Carter," she said with a polite nod. "Didn't expect to see you down here." James flashed his trademark charming smile. "Just helping out. You know how it is. Team. Effort." Sarah's gaze flicked to me, brimming with unspoken questions. "Right. Well, Emily, I need you upstairs. Mrs. Thompson's asking for you." I nodded, seizing the escape. "I'll be right there." As Sarah turned to leave, she shot me a look that promised a later interrogation. I let out a shaky breath, trying to regain my composure. James stepped closer again, his voice a low murmur. "This isn't over, Emily." Before I could reply, he slipped away, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts. The rest of my shift was a nightmare. I couldn't focus, my mind replaying that basement moment on an endless loop. Sarah's suspicious glance gnawed at me. She'd always been protective, and I knew she'd demand answers soon. But it wasn't Sarah who threw me off balance next. It was Mrs. Thompson, the elderly patient in room 204. She was a sharp-witted woman, her mind untouched by her years, and she'd taken a shine to me. As I adjusted her IV, she gave me a knowing smile. "You and that doctor make a lovely couple, dear." I froze, my hands fumbling. "What? Oh no, we're not..." She chuckled, waving off my protest. "Don't worry, your secret's safe with me. But be careful. These walls have eyes." My stomach churned. If Mrs. Thompson had picked up on it, who else had? I managed a weak laugh, brushing it off, but her words stuck with me, a quiet warning echoing in my mind. Later at the nurse's station, I caught Rachel, another nurse with a chip on her shoulder, muttering to a colleague, "I swear she's always hanging around him. It's unprofessional." I clenched my jaw, pretending not to hear. Rachel's jealousy was old news, but now it felt like a loaded gun. One slip, and she'd make sure the whole hospital knew. By the end of my shift, I was a mess of nerves. I needed to talk to James, to figure out what we were doing before it all spiraled, out of control. As I headed to the locker room, I found a note slipped into my pocket. "Meet me in the on-call room, 2 a.m., Jay." My heart skipped a beat. The on-call room was tucked away, rarely used at that hour. It was a risk, but the pull of being alone with him again was irresistible. At 2 a.m., the hospital was a ghost town. I crept down the hall, my footsteps hushed on the linoleum. The on-call room door was ajar when I arrived. I pushed it open, and there he was. James perched on the edge of the bed, his eyes locking onto mine. "Emily," he said, rising to his feet. "I wasn't sure you'd come." I shut the door behind me, my voice trembling. "We need to talk, James. Whatever this is, it's getting out of hand." He closed, the distance between us, his gaze unwavering. "I know, but I can't stop thinking about you." Before I could protest, his hand cupped my cheek, warm and steady. The world shrank to just us, the air thick with longing. Slowly, he leaned in, his lips hovering inches from mine. Then, the PA system blared. "Code blue, room 312. Code blue, room 312. We sprang apart, the moment shattered. Duty yanked us back to reality, no time to process. As we bolted from the room, I glimpsed a shadow in the hallway, a figure slipping away into the darkness. Someone had seen us. You won't believe what happens next. Subscribe for more workplace secrets. The days following that charged moment in the on-call room were a nightmare. Every shift at the hospital felt like walking through a minefield. I sensed eyes on me, nurses whispering behind my back, their voices dropping as I approached. By the end of the week, the rumors were undeniable, snaking through the halls like poison, and I knew exactly who was behind it. Rachel. I'd caught her smirking at me, her eyes glinting with triumph. She'd always resented me, but now she had leverage. That night in the on-call room, when James and I nearly kissed, I'd seen a shadow retreat from the doorway. It had to be her. When I confronted her, she played dumb. "What's wrong, Emily?" she taunted, her tone sickly sweet. Feeling guilty about something? I wanted to scream, but she wasn't wrong. Guilt gnawed at me. Guilt over risking my career, my reputation, all for a man who was my superior. Yet, no matter how much I tried to reason with myself, I couldn't shake him. James was in my blood, a fever I couldn't break. It all boiled over one stormy evening. I escaped to the hospital rooftop, my sanctuary when the chaos got too loud. But when I pushed open the door, there he was, James, leaning against the railing, raindrops glistening in his hair under the city lights. "James," I breathed, startled. "What are you doing here?" He turned, his expression softening. "I needed to think. It's been a hell of a week." "Tell me about it," I muttered, stepping closer. He reached out, his fingers brushing mine. sending a jolt through me. Emily, I'm sorry. This mess, it's because of me. Don't, I said, my voice cracking. We're both in this. I wanted it too. His eyes held mine, fierce and unguarded. So where do we go from here? I didn't have words. Instead, I moved into him, my hands pressing against his chest. He pulled me in, his arms strong around me. And for a moment the world faded, the rain, the hospital, the rules. Then he kissed me. It was electric, urgent, a collision of everything we'd held back. His hands gripped my waist, my fingers tangled in his damp hair, and I lost myself in him. But a creak from the rooftop door snapped us apart. My pulse hammered as a janitor stepped out, oblivious, heading to the far corner. We were safe, but barely. We can't keep doing this, I whispered, breathless. It's too dangerous. I know, he said, raking a hand through his hair. But I can't stop, Emily. I've tried. Before I could argue, my pager buzzed, a patient emergency. Duty dragged me away again. The next day, a new threat arrived. Dr. Laura Matthews, James's ex-wife. She swept into the hospital like a queen, tall, blonde, radiating authority. I watched from the nurse's station as she cornered James, her voice cutting through the hum of the ward. James, we need to talk, she said, icy and composed. Not here, Laura, he replied, glancing at the onlookers. It's never the right time with you, she shot back, her mask slipping. But this can't wait. Their words faded as they moved away, but the tension between them crackled, jealousy twisted in my gut. What did she want? Was she here to reclaim him? The questions gnawed at me. Later, I found James in the break room, head in his hands. Are you okay? I asked quietly. He looked up, exhaustion lining his face. Laura knows about us. She saw us on the rooftop last night. She was visiting a patient. My stomach dropped. What does she want? She's pushing me to transfer hospitals to leave you behind. She says it's the only way to save our careers. I felt sick. And what do you think? He stood, closing the gap between us. I'm not leaving, Emily. I won't let her control me. But if she tells the administration, then I'll face it, he said, his voice hard with resolve. I'm not walking away from you. His defiance should have comforted me, but it only deepened my fear. We were losing control. That night, as I left the hospital, Rachel ambushed me in the parking lot. Her eyes burned with spite. I know about you and Dr. Carter, she sneered, and soon everyone will. Rachel, please, I said, my voice trembling. This isn't what you think. Save it, she snapped. You think you're untouchable, but you're just his latest fling. End it, or I'll make sure you both pay. I opened my mouth to fight back, but headlights cut through the dark. James stepped out of his car, his face thunderous. Rachel, back off, he growled. This isn't your business. She hesitated, then retreated, but her glare promised revenge. James turned to me, taking my hands. Emily, I'm sorry. This is spiraling. What do we do? I asked, tears threatening. We'll handle it together, he said, steady and sure. Trust me. I wanted to. God, I did. But then he spoke again, his voice soft and raw. Emily, I think I'm falling in love with you. The words hung between us, a lifeline and a grenade all at once. What happens next? Subscribe for the explosive part 4. It all came to a head one fateful night. Rachel's threats had reached a boiling point, and I knew I had to confront her. I found her in the break room, her eyes gleaming with malice. Rachel, We need to talk, I said, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. She sneered. About what? Your little affair with Dr. Carter? I took a deep breath. Yes, and I'm asking you to stop. This isn't just about me. It's about James, too, and the hospital. Rachel laughed bitterly. You think I care about the hospital? You think I care about you or James? You're just a distraction, Emily. A temporary thrill for him. Her words stung, but I refused to back down. Maybe. But that doesn't give you the right to ruin our lives. She stepped closer, her voice low and menacing. You have no idea what I'm capable of, Emily. I could make sure you never work in this hospital again. Or any hospital, for that matter. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I held my ground. And what would that accomplish, Rachel? You'd still be miserable, and I'd still be gone. Is that really what you want? For a moment, she faltered, her expression wavering. Then, she hardened again. I want you to end it with James, publicly. Tell everyone it was a mistake, that you regret it. Then maybe I'll consider keeping your secret. I stared at her, incredulous. You want me to humiliate myself? To throw James under the bus? Rachel shrugged. It's your choice, Emily. Your career or your pride. I felt a surge of anger, but I pushed it down. This wasn't about pride. It was about survival, and I knew what I had to do. Fine, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I'll do it. Rachel's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed in suspicion. You will? I nodded, feeling a weight settle in my chest. Yes, but on one condition. You leave James alone. No more threats. No more rumors. Let him move on. She considered this, then nodded slowly. Deal. The next day, I stood in front of the hospital staff, my heart pounding. James was there, his eyes filled with concern and confusion. I avoided his gaze, focusing on the words I had to say. I have something to confess, I began, my voice trembling. I've been involved in a relationship with Dr. James Carter. It was a mistake, and I regret it deeply. I take full responsibility for my actions and the impact they've had on the hospital. A murmur rippled through the crowd, but I pressed on. I've decided to end the relationship and focus on my duties as a nurse. I hope you can forgive me and allow me to continue serving our patients with the dedication they deserve. As I finished, I felt tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. I glanced at James, who looked stunned and hurt. I wanted to run to him, to explain, but I knew I couldn't. Not yet. Later that night, I found James waiting for me in the parking lot. His face was a mask of pain and betrayal. Emily, what the hell was that? He demanded, his voice raw. Why did you do that? I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I had to, James. Rachel was going to expose us. She was going to ruin everything. He shook his head, disbelief etched on his features. So you threw me under the bus? You made me look like a fool? No, I said, reaching for his hand. I took the blame. I protected you. He pulled away, his eyes flashing with anger. Protected me? By ending our relationship in front of everyone? By making it seem like it was all a mistake? I felt my heart breaking, but I knew I had to stay strong. It was the only way, James. To save your career, to save mine. We can't keep doing this. It's too risky. He stared at me, his expression a mix of hurt and resignation. So that's it? We're done? I nodded, tears streaming down my face. For now. Maybe in the future, when things are different. He laughed, bitterly. The future? Emily, there is no future for us. Not after this. I felt a sob rising in my throat, but I swallowed it down. I'm sorry, James. I truly am." He turned away, his shoulders slumped. Me too. As he walked away, I felt a piece of my heart go with him. But I knew I'd made the right choice, for both of us. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into my work, trying to forget the pain of losing James. Rachel kept her word, and the rumors died down. But the ache in my chest remained, a constant reminder of what I'd sacrificed. One day, as I was leaving the hospital, I saw James in the hallway. He was talking to Laura, his ex-wife, and they seemed close. A pang of jealousy shot through me, but I pushed it aside. He deserved to be happy, even if it wasn't with me. As I passed them, James looked up, and our eyes met. For a moment, time stood still. Then, he gave me a small, sad smile, and I knew that in some way, we'd always be connected. I smiled back, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. Maybe this wasn't the end after all. Maybe it was just the beginning of something new. As I drove home that night, I couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened. I'd risked it all for a forbidden romance, and though it hadn't turned out the way I'd hoped, I'd learned something invaluable. Sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that shape us the most. I'd chosen my career, my integrity, and in doing so, I'd found a strength I never knew I had. But as I parked my car and sat in the quiet, one thought still haunted me. Was it really over? Or was this just a pause in a story that hadn't yet found its true ending? Thank you for listening to my confession. If you want more untold stories like this, you know what to do. Subscribe and leave a like if you want more workplace secrets. And tell me honestly, what would you have done in my shoes?